if we hadn't had the staff, the 12 staff there sitting around the staff room table, talking every month about what they'd learnt and where they were going to go next and what they do and how they deal with the problems, if we really hadn't built that group knowledge, then we wouldn't have got there wouldn't have been nearly the changes that happened at Belfield. And some of you have heard John Fleming, I don't know what he talks about the pillars or something, there's pillars of learning, or I don't know. Anyway, what I was calling them was just the code of teaching practice. What is the knowledge? All it was what is the knowledge that underpins professional practice in the school? What is it? And let's bring it together. We need an implementation plan. In other words, a plan. It's fine to have our goals, but if we don't have an implementation plan, then our goals are almost like New Year's Day resolutions. We don't lose the weight because we don't do anything, and so we need to put in place these processes in order for the changes in teaching to occur. And as I've said on your notes there, the school will have procedures ready to guide the professional learning about literacy for 2010. So you'd see that any school leadership team that really wanted their school to move forwards in 2010, they'd be wanting to build this knowledge now. Imagine if you're given the option, you can either gain knowledge now, so you'll have all the obstacles ironed out next year, or you can ignore it. What would you go for? You'd go for the option that delivered the knowledge, so you'd be better able, you'd be more prepared for the future. So in terms of embedding the strategies, I'm wanting to push the idea that we need to look at what do we need for professional learning. What are the structures, the processes we need? Now, if you just run your eye down those 4 points, and bearing in mind Giovanna's point about explicitness and things being observable and concrete, to what extent has your school moved in achieving each of those? Now, I'm not wanting an assessment, I'm not wanting an answer, I'm just raising that as a question. To what extent has each of those been put in place? And if we can have in the schools each one of those having moved a bit further along by the end of this year, we will have made progress. Are there any queries that anyone would like to raise at this point? Okay, let's continue. In terms of looking at embedding the literacy strategies, you've all had a go at putting in place the literacy strategies. You've attempted some of them. What have you taught and what have the students learnt? As a way of putting these strategies in place, and I've mentioned this in the schools that I've been meeting with, I've mentioned some of these aspects. It's important that you only put in place 1 or 2 of the high reliability strategies at a time, and that's to do with reading the situation and not overburdening the staff. Having a focus on 1 or 2 at a time is much more digestible than running with all of them. I'm going to actually modify that position in a few minutes. Secondly, we do need a clear operational plan. In other words, what are you aiming for and how you're going to get there. We do need explicit professional learning procedures led by people who can lead literacy, in other words, you guys. There needs to be things like the group knowledge. There needs to be a focus on a whole range of sorts of data that relate to students' literacy knowledge, data that relate to what the students know about the strategies. There needs to be the data that I gather about the students' literacy knowledge week by week when I ask them to tell me the strategies they know and so on. There needs to be data about what teachers know. There needs to be data about students' motivation to engage in the literacy. It's very hard if you're wanting to put in place good literacy teaching, but your students don't want to really learn to be literate, they don't see the value of it. There needs to be a clear model of teaching, and the model of teaching, I guess, is what I've said in part so far. I couldn't imagine running a lesson without having the students tell me what they'd learnt at the end. That would be a key aspect of my model of teaching. You know, I just wouldn't. I just think it's so important. Or I couldn't imagine running a lesson where I didn't have the children initially bring together what they knew. That they're parts of my model of teaching. Another part of my model of teaching is the feedback. Another part of it is the explicitness. They're all aspects. If you said, what's your model of teaching? They're all things that I'd be wanting to push. So I need to be clear on what teaching looks like. And I also, you need to have a clear idea of how to lead change in teaching. Obviously, if we're looking at you reflecting on how far you've moved already with the high reliability strategies, and this is on page 2 of the notes. First of all, you need to audit what it is that you've taught already. And in a very simplistic way, you can say, well, I've taught the students getting knowledge ready. I've taught them how to work out the meanings of words, getting knowledge ready. And I'm now moving on to the next strategy. You can see there that I've got 3 columns. And I've divided the teaching, or what the students know, into 2 categories. What I'm scaffolding in my teaching, and what it is that the students can do independently. And this is going to be a very important distinction in terms of what I'll be teaching, and also for the rest of our discussion today. I can teach a group of students to get their knowledge ready. I can cue them to, before they begin to read, to look at the pictures and say them in sentences or visualise what they think of with the topic. And I can tell them to suggest what questions I might answer. And I can ask them, what will you do as you read, and so on. And the students will do it. That's me scaffolding their teaching.